Hi everybody, Rachel here from Rachthestamper.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make one of the Father's Day / May Club Kit to Go cards. So this is a card that could kind of go either way. So you could make this into a Father's Day card if you'd like, but it's also a great birthday card, great anytime card to send to any guy or really any person in your life because it's a very neutral theme. I do love the plaid, so I think it's really nice. Now, when I show you the card today, it might have a little bit different of a few of the designer series papers, only because I have used everything that I had, so I kind of had to make do when I did my examples. But this is the card, so it's an open flap card. It's really fun. Now, don't mind this glue dot. Yours won't have that. Mine was just for picture purposes. But I'm going to show you also a couple different things you could do. So I have created this card with Stampin' Blends. Now, if you don't happen to have Stampin' Blends, what you could do instead is you could use your regular Stampin' Write markers, and then you could use blender pens to make it a little bit lighter. And if you don't have the Stampin' Write markers, what you could do is you could use the ink pad and use the blender pens to be able to color it. So you could make it a little bit darker, a little bit lighter, maybe use two different shades. So I'm going to show you how I did it, and then if you wanted to change it, like I said, you absolutely can. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with the stamping. So we have our boat and our fish, and to be able to stamp with the blends, you absolutely have to have Memento ink. That is the one thing. If you don't have Memento ink, there's a chance that when you use your blends, it could smudge the black that you stamp with. So you definitely want to use this because this is not an alcohol-based ink, and the Stampin' Blends are alcohol-based. So they basically will kind of work together with each other. So for example, let me see if I can grab it so I can show you. If you were to use StazOn. StazOn is an alcohol-based ink, and if you use an alcohol marker with it, it will actually smudge it. So you want to use StazOn more when you're doing watercoloring. So if you wanted to decide to try this with watercolor instead, what you could do is you could use StazOn ink, and then you could use your watercolor pencils or pens. So just a couple tips there for you. So we're going to go ahead and ink our boat, and we're going to kind of stamp this kind of midway. There you go. Now this one's a little close, so I'm gonna have to put my fish over here as well. Kind of put him down near the bottom. So I'm just inking up my fish. Put him down here at the bottom. So you definitely want to give this time to dry. So I'm going to set this on the side, and then in the meantime, I'm going to grab my sentiment panel, and this one is all measured for you. So I'll always look up to you no matter how much I've grown. So you can kind of stamp it in the center. You could stamp it to the side. You can definitely, oops, well, that's why we have two sides of paper. You can trim it down if you need to. Let's try that again. And for most of these pieces, so for the white, you'll notice you have two pieces. You should also for this one, because I wanted to give you an extra piece just in case you did a whoops. So in case you did a whoops and then you flipped it over and it still wasn't good, you should have a backup piece in there. So again, once this dries, I'm going to trim it up just a little bit on the side. So I'm going to move that one over as well. I have a couple more things to stamp. Just wipe these off. But I think I might have forgotten. I did, so I'm going to pull one out. Forgotten my inside panel. So for this card, it has lots of layers. So you can have this little inside panel here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this piece and we're going to stamp our greeting, and then we're going to stamp the oars. And I have the oars in Early Espresso. So I'm going to stamp those first. So what I did was I stamped one in full strength, and then I stamped it off and stamped again. So we'll kind of put one, and then we'll just put the other one. There you go. And then one more time with the Memento and our other sentiment. There you go. Put this in the upper corner. It'll give you plenty of room to write. There you go. Perfect. Okay. So let me move these couple pieces over. These should still be good. I'm going to go ahead and put some of these together. So for our inside panel, all we're going to do is layer this square onto our piece inside. So luckily, I did have that piece. But one other thing I want to show you is, I didn't score this piece, but we're going to fold this in half. Yours is all going to be scored and ready to go, which when you score it, it helps it to crease a little bit better. So I'm going to adhere this to this But I don't want to adhere it to the card base yet because we still have to put this little panel underneath, okay? So I'm going to take liquid glue because it helps you to be able to wiggle it if you don't like the way it's lined up. Here we go. And kind of make sure that's relatively straight. And one other thing you can do, just since you have it here, so if you wanted to, I just want to make sure this is clean, you can actually take your blender pen and you can kind of fill in, so it's going to kind of blend the color that you stamped. So instead of just having an outline of an oar, it'll give it a little bit more of a realistic look by filling in the color. And I didn't do anything except just spreading the color that's already stamped. So one will be lighter because it was stamped off. There you go. And then you'll have your 2 oars. Okay, so this one is going to go on the inside panel here. Okay, so I'm just going to set that in there for now. One other thing we can put together while we're waiting for that to dry. So my panel is a little bit different than yours in the front here. So I'm going to just adhere this together and it'll lay on top just like that. I was contemplating using the other side, but the golfing and the boating didn't really jive together too well. So went with the Argyle, which I think does make a cute card as well. Actually think I might send this to my uncle because he loves golf. First of all, even though it's not really the golf side, but the Argyle is really cool. So then this can get mounted onto the front, okay, because there's not anything that's going to be impeding that part. So we can go ahead and put this onto the front. Kind of make sure it's relatively evenly spaced. Looks pretty good. All right, and I'm going to take my snips and just trim this up just a teeny bit. That's good. We're going to put this kind of down here at the bottom. So I'm going to pop that up on a couple of dimensionals. Now, one thing, it is important to know when you're using white cardstock, because we do have white and black dimensionals, it's important when you're using white cardstock to use white dimensionals, because if you don't have anything, even if you didn't make a whoopsie and stamp something on the back like I did, if you put the black dimensionals on the back, it actually will kind of show through to your paper and it makes it almost look a little bit dirty. So I would highly recommend, if you're doing something with darker paper, definitely use the dark ones. But if you're using lighter paper, go with the lighter ones. And I'm lining this up all the way to the end of the card here. Okay, so just like that. So we're almost in the home stretch here. One other thing I forgot to do on this little piece, and I'm just going to do it real quick so I don't forget. That way you don't have to wait. Your paper is going to already be scored, but I forgot to score mine. So this is going to be the flap for underneath here, which will go on top of this. Okay, so we're going to grab our boat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Granny Apple Green for the fish, and I tend to like to start with the light, so I'm just going to fill in a little bit of light. You could even give him just a teeny bit of, this is Balmy Blue, I believe. No, Seaside Spray. Just a little bit of blue. And then I'm going to go with the bullet point of the Granny Apple Green. Kind of more of a troutish look. Okay, so we have that. That was for the fish. So then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to color the boat first, and then we'll go back and fill in the water. So for the boat, what I have is light and dark crumb cake, and I have the bronze marker. Now, the blends are not retiring, even though they kind of looked like they were the way they advertised it on the Stampin' Up! Retirement list, but they're no longer going to be sold as individuals. They're going to be sold as combos. So if you purchase the bronze, you'll also get the ivory, which is kind of nice because they go together pretty well. So I'm going to start with the light crumb cake. I'm kind of just filling in a little bit of the boat. Not really. More the spots that I think I'm not going to add a whole lot of color to. So at this point, if you don't have the blends, what you could do is you could use your crumb cake, and your soft suede markers would work really nicely. So you have plenty of options, so don't worry if you don't have the blends for this. I'm going to go on the top of the rim with the dark crumb cake and kind of a little bit of the shadow parts. And I'm using the brush tip still. And I'm actually going to go back and I'm going to blend it again with the light. So kind of want a little bit more shadow. And then when you get to the little places, if you wanted to, you could switch to the bullet tip. But I find that I use the brush tip way more than I use the bullet tip, unless I'm using really small stuff. So then I'm just going to go back again with the light crumb cake. And I'm going to kind of soften out those dark spots by blending over it with the light. And we're going to add a little bit more color over here to the seats. But I'm going to do that with the bronze. And then this one I am going to use the bullet tip. So I'm just kind of adding a little bit of color. One other thing you want to make sure when you use your blends, it's also very important to use a nice white paper. So when I say that, I mean either using a thick whisper white or the shimmery white, because they tend to blend much nicer. So I'm just going to go over just a little bit more with the light crumb cake, just to kind of soften those edges out a little bit. And this will lighten up once it dries. So that's one other thing you have to remember, that it may look a little bit darker, but once it dries, it lightens up. And then the other thing with the shimmer cardstock is it does give you a little bit of a sparkle to it. So that's going to be all for the browns. So then what we're going to do is we're going to start with light pool party. And I'm going to kind of just bring in a little bit of water. Kind of all over. And then a little bit of dark, just a smidge. And then I'm going to go with the light Seaside spray, kind of just to fill in the color a little bit. So once again, you could use your, if you don't have the blends, you could use your blender pen and your ink pads. You could use your Stampin' Write markers. Could use your watercolor pencils and then blend it out with either water or alcohol. I'm not really being real specific when I'm doing this water because it will really blend together nicely. I'm just going to bring in just a little bit of dark here. Dark Seaside spray again, just to kind of give that undershadow to the boat. And then I'm going to go over the whole thing again with the light pool party. There you go. So one other thing you could do if you want, and this is also an optional thing, I didn't do it, but you could also take your Wink of Stella brush and you could go over the water if you want to add a little bit more sparkle to it. You could more so do it with the fish since his head is popping out. Just give a little bit so he has kind of like that glimmer of coming out of the water. So very, very simple to make this, okay? One other thing I wanted to show you. When you do your card, if you wanted to hide this flap a little bit more, another thing that you could do, and I haven't done it, but you could, is you could actually layer these two pieces together with this kind of sandwiched in between if you wanted to. So that's another way of doing it if you wanted to have it so you really couldn't see the flap, because then the way, if you layer these together, it will be hidden underneath, but just another option for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one more time my dimensionals. And I'm going to pop a few of these on the back. As you can see with the blends, the color does leak through. So you want to make sure, oops, you want to make sure that you use something that you're going to layer on top of something else so you can't see it. So that's one other little tip. Okay, and I'm going to put this on in the center. And then that way, when I layer this on top, it'll be just like that. So what I'm going to do in order to put this down is you want to use, oops, excuse me, I'm sorry, some sort of a double-sided tape. So I'm using a piece of Terran tape here, okay, and I'm putting it on the flap that's going to go into the card, okay, because you want it to stay. So I'm going to press that down. Now, one other thing that you can do when you pull this off is you can put a little bit of liquid glue on here. That way, and it doesn't have to be much. I mean, it could just be like a drop or so. Because it will give you the maneuverability of being able to slide this around where you need it to be. So when you put this down and you're going to put this wedge underneath, if you have that liquid glue, it helps you to be able to move it a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and put glue on the back of this too. That way we can set this down. So the only thing you want to do is you might want to give yourself a test run right now before you put this on. So if you want to watch this video and then pause it and then go back and do it again, but you kind of want to figure where you want your piece centered. So if you figure if you're going to center it right about here, because you want your corner to be there, how far up do you want it? Because you also have your boat and you don't want to overlap with your sentiment there. So I kind of do it like this. I'll kind of layer it up of where I want it. Take this and set it on the side. Press this down. So that's going to be the piece that's going to layer. And this one, oops, that's why I said you want to make sure you have it straight, because you can pull it off if you have the liquid glue on top of it as well. And then we're going to layer this on top. So it kind of hides that little seam back there. Oops, hold on. Let's see. Yep, give me one just second. I'm going to pull this just a little bit out, because you want to kind of have your fold. There you go, just so it goes over. So you want to have this folded edge right here, right past the edge of the card, so it will actually close, okay? So make sure when you look at this and you're going to put this together, just take your time. If you're watching the video through, take your time and then go back, okay? So make sure you have all the components that go together. And then all you have to do is add this little piece on here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing. And I'm going to hit this real quick with my bone folder just to make sure it's nicely creased, since everything is in where it's supposed to be. So I'm actually going to put some liquid glue right to about where my finger is. So I'm just kind of eyeballed it right here. That way it'll give it a good amount of stick. And set that right there. And then I'm going to make sure there's nothing sticking out. Nope, no glue. Because you don't want it to accidentally get sealed closed. So that would be a doozy. And then if for any reason, so when I adjusted this, I have just a little bit of sticky. If you happen to have, and probably most of you do, an embossing buddy or some sort of an embossing tool, what you can do is you can tap this right here and it will actually take the sticky away. Okay, so then you won't have to worry about the person feeling the stickiness on the card. But that's it. A really fun card. Not a whole lot of work. Get a chance to use your blends. Again, if you do it with the blends, it is going to be a little bit darker. It does give it a really nice realistic look, but you can also do this with your markers. You can do this with your ink refill. So many different ways to do it. And then you could also make this card over again. And that's one thing I wanted to show you, just in case you decide you really like this layout. We used the second largest in the stitch circles for this part here. And then in the layering circles, it's the second largest for this gray panel here. Okay, and all the rest of the measurements are on the PDF that came along with this, and you should have found this video at the bottom of the PDF in case you didn't. It should have been a clickable link, but it's a really fun card to make. You could make this over and over again with lots of different DSP layers. You could use different sides of the paper if you happen to have this paper. It's a great card for so many different occasions. So thank you guys so very much for purchasing and getting this card kit. I do appreciate it. Again, I will do another card kit for the month of June. I'm not decided on what we're going to do theme-wise yet, but I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, if you have any questions, all you have to do is send me an email at rachthestamper@gmail.com, and you can leave a comment on this video as well if you like it. Thank you guys so much for watching.